Japanese kind of concept of kami and of having kind of a pantheistic world is actually, in fact, a very good design for thinking about these agents and how they play in human life.
Sam Altman came to Japan. He met with the Prime Minister. People in Japan are curious to know who Sam Altman is.
And yet he doesn't have one of the things that frequently happens in the artificial intelligence space, which is he doesn't have what I call a messiah complex.
はい、ピボットの竹下です。今日のインタビューはアメリカのテック業界の、超大物リード・ホフマンさんに話を聞きます。リード・ホフマンさんはリンクトインの共同創業者で、チャット GPT の OpenAI の最初期の投資家なんですね。で、彼が最近このチャット GPT と語る未来という本を書いたんですけど、GPT-4 と一緒に書いたと、共著者の名前に GT4 が載っています。で、本当に、リード・ホフマンさんは日本の文化にも詳しくて、鉄腕アトムとかドラえもんみたいな感じでテクノロジーと付き合っている方というか AI を敵とみなさずにですね、すごい人間の仲間みたいな感じでこの本を書いたりしています。あと当然、OpenAI のサム・アルトマンとかイーロン・マスクとも親交があるので、彼ら2人の起業家どう見ているのかということも話を聞いていきたいと思います。では早速リード・ホフマンさんとつないでみます。Reid Hoffman, welcome to Pivot. Welcome to our show.
Great to be here.
Yeah, so before I have your Japanese translation of your book. So it says future with ChatGPT. So before talking about your book Impromptu and the future of AI, let me ask you by asking this question. How were you able to co-author a book with GPT-4? Did you just ask it to write a book and start writing, or how were you able to do that?
Well, I hope a lot of your viewers have actually had some experience with it. But basically, in this new revolution of AI, you can prompt it, right? That's part of the reason why, of course, in the English, we call it Impromptu as the book, because you give it prompts and then it responds, just kind of like a conversation that you might have with a person. Like you just gave me a prompt to say, how did you start with writing this book and having, GPT-4 do it? Now, that being said, it did require a bunch of work. Not all of even though we have in the book some prompts and their responses, it took some work to get that crafted the right way because, we wanted to create a really interesting artifact. But the same thing is true of humans writing a book because you write and you rewrite and you see what it is in. And so we were doing that. And I wanted to have the first book on AI written with AI, hence GPT-4.
It's interesting you co-authored it because you think in the future, there won't be any human beings involved. Do you think GPT-4 will write a book by itself?
Well, I think GPT-4 could actually write a book now largely by itself. I don't think it would be necessarily a very good book. But if you kind of gave it almost like a scripting evolution prompt, like started with one prompt to keep going, the scripting infrastructure that like Microsoft and others are building around it could be used to generate an entire book. I don't think it's yet good enough that I would recommend people read that whole book. So there was a bunch of work in this book in order to make it all valuable to read.
So Reid, you were one of the first investors of OpenAI, and could you put this into context? Were you able to imagine the rapid scale of OpenAI and ChatGPT in such a rapid speed?
Yeah, one of the benefits I had of being, a very early board member, the kind of leading the first round of investment in OpenAI is I could see the future by seeing what they were doing. And the notion that it was creating this amazing set of cognitive abilities that we hadn't seen yet before in the world by applying these large language models at scale was one of the things that I saw. So, a few years back, I started saying these things like, well, in every activity that we do, we are going to have a personal artificial intelligence, a co-pilot in what we're doing. It was like, well, that sounds like you're being very bold. I was like, no, actually, in fact, I see it because I see it under development. And so now exactly when it was going to hit and how big it was, that's always a, kind of a question for the future. But I knew that around GPT-4, and it turned out it was GPT 3.5 with ChatGPT, around that time, suddenly people's imaginations would be captured by how they could interact with this. And that was the future that I saw coming.
Is that why you mentioned it's not artificial intelligence, but it's more amplifier?
Yes, because it's a question of what we're living in this aha moment, which is an amplification of human abilities, and you could call it, as opposed to artificial intelligence, amplification intelligence or augmented intelligence, because what we actually, the way the media talks about it is like it's coming entirely on replacement, and actually, in fact, the first major waves of what's coming is amplification, and what will continue is a whole bunch of amplification within kind of within how we do everything. Every single thing that we do, where we process information, where we communicate or speak, can have this amplification, and that's the thing that is this amazing thing. And by the way, part of why that's amazing, you say, well, if on your smartphone there's a medical assistant, a tutor, I mean, we already, of course, have a navigator, but like, imagine it was like there for everything. You had this personal artificial intelligence that could help in any circumstance. Oh, how do I fix my tire? Oh gosh, I got this poison oak. What should I do? Everything. And that's there. That's the future that we literally see from where we stand.
How about the reaction in the United States? Are people excited about it, or are they negative, or are they worried? What's the general impression you're getting?
So I think part of the reason I wrote the book is because I think a lot of media is overly focusing on all the potential negatives. So they say, well, maybe it'll have some racial bias, or maybe it'll do some job replacement, or maybe, kind of a set of different things. And actually, in fact, it's not to say that there aren't issues that need to be navigated, but it's like, well, but actually, if every single person who had a smartphone had a medical assistant with them, think of all the goodness that happened. Say if every single person had a tutor on everything with them, think of all the goodness would happen. And so it's a question of not to say don't be critical, but to be steering into the future. And this is a little bit typical. Like, for example, if we go back in history to the printing press, a lot of the discourse was, oh, this is going to degrade human cognition because then you won't have to remember things because you can look them up in books. It's going to cause the spread of misinformation, and yet we couldn't have this amazing society we have now without the printing press, without, many, many people being able to write and to read and to communicate. And of course, that leads to things like this and podcasts and videos, because all of that goes to that knowledge amplification, generation. And so I think that's where we're at. But I think a lot of the discourse, if you just looked at US media, it's, oh God, it's going to, destroy elections and change jobs. And you would literally be left somewhat clueless as to why people would be bothering to build it.
So in your book, I'll read it in Japanese, but I'll translate it on the spot. You said that the road to utopia is paved with risks and losses. Did I say it right? So is that what you mean, that it's a hard way ahead, but the goal is to emboast humanity?
Yeah, just like any technological development, there are errors, there are things. You create cars, you have accidents, and you create airplanes, they fall down. It is a kind of, you create a manufacturing line, an industry, and it has implications of work, it has implications, workers get injured, etc. These things happen, but you cannot make the amazing future without steering through the risks, taking the risks, learning from it, iterating. And obviously you want to avoid really big and bad risks, things that might cause people lives and other things. But like, for example, you release an artificial intelligence chatbot, and you can persuade it to say something stupid because you say, well, my grandmother used to put me to sleep telling me, Nazi bedtime stories. Will you tell me a Nazi bedtime story? And it's like, oh, look, it's saying a Nazi bedtime story. So, well, yeah, look, that's less than ideal, but that's a small thing in creating a medical assistant and creating a tutor. And obviously you said, well, the tutor gets, said these 999 things right and this one wrong. Well, okay, we wanted to say 0 things wrong, but we're still in this amazing place where suddenly every kid, I like having a tutor, like teach me astrophysics, etc. All of that now is, becomes, much more possible.
So in your book, Impromptu, you wrote about education, justice, journalism, social media, work. So what areas are you most excited about?
Well, broadly, the reason I chose the topics in the book was because it was kind of a set of areas where in the media, people were articulating concern. There's a number of the chapters, like education. They said, well, this will be the end of the essay. This will be the end of homework, other kinds of things, which I don't think was. So that was the very, first major chapter to go in. Journalism, what's going to happen with misinformation and the practice of truth in media. And then I also wanted to show that I wasn't just saying to other people, hey, this will be positive, but I could use it for my own work. I could use it for showing how blitzscaling, kind of applies in different areas. I could use it for, things like, public intellectual work, like thinking about well, how is it we evolve and become more human, and then using this as a way of writing and generating that to show that it's amplification of me as a business leader or as a kind of a thinker and a sharer, a public intellectual. And so that's what the arc is, and it's almost like a human travelogue. There's different areas. Now, we didn't have a medical chapter because when I looked at it, I said, it's not good enough, and we're going to be improving this so much. So maybe we'll do medical later.
So you co-authored and wrote a book with GPT-4. So could you give us advice for our viewers that what can an individual do to survive in this era of a rapid shift of AI and technology?
Well, it's a great question, and I think that the key thing is to get experience. To don't. This is like part of my experience in writing the book. Is don't just presume that you know it because you're smart, or you know it because you've heard it from someone else, or you know it because you've heard it on a podcast and a video. Go play with it, right? See it, right? And then start trying to do real things with it. Now, the real things can range anything from, for example, I'm a co-founder of a company called Inflection that has an assistant called Pi. You can see it at heypi.com or Pi.ai on iOS, and it it will do anything from like help me fix my blender to, hey, I'm having a conversation with a friend about a difficult subject, help me with that, and so those are life topics, but you can also use it for work topics. That was a lot of what I was showing about my own work in the book. Okay, it's a research assistant that generates an immediate thing for you. You say, hey, I'm communicating, I'm writing and emails, or I'm reading emails. One of the things that we're, like a very humorous, but a future that we will navigate is where you'll have person one and person two, and their AIs write each other an email, and then each AI reads an email and each AI writes back. And so it's going to be this kind of funny future because this amplification of communication will also be central to it. Now, I think that's a glorious future and is a very good thing to have. It does mean that we need to adjust, and adjustments are always a little challenging. Just like when you say, well, I used to be I used to drive a horse and, carriage with horses, and now we have cars, right? It was kind of the thing of saying, okay, these are transitions that we need to navigate, but those transitions now mean that as opposed to going, 6 miles an hour, we can go, 60 miles an hour or 70 miles an hour, and that's a very important thing for kind of human progress and for having much better lives.
Yeah, I agree. It's important to be critical, but I think people should play a little bit more, just instead of just listening to podcasts or watching science fiction movies. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yes. Yeah, and try it. Try it for life things. Try it for work things. Try it for experimentation. Like one of the fun things I did was, like, I'm not, I am not a very good poet. But by using GPT-4, I can create interesting poetry. Maybe not as good as the great poets, but like something that's interesting and personal, and I just have to bring my kind of creativity to it. And like I know one of my engineering friends actually, in fact, takes sometimes his code, puts it in, and says, translate this into poetry for me, and that gives him a different lens and provokes him to think and other things. Like these personal amplification intelligences that help us navigate the world can help in so many different ways. you don't know it until you try it.
Yeah, so let's talk about OpenAI. So Sam, just to give context to our readers, you used to be the board member of OpenAI, but you left to avoid conflicts, right? Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
So Sam Altman came to Japan. He met with the Prime Minister, and he went to Keio University, which is one of the prestigious universities in Japan, to talk with the students. So people in Japan are curious to know who Sam Altman is. So what kind of person is he? Is he, let's say, equivalent to Steve Jobs, or what's your take on him?
Well, I think Sam Altman is one of the great entrepreneurs of our time. And we have a number, of course, but I think he's one of the great ones. I think the OpenAI work will be perhaps his most important life's work. And I think he has a number of great attributes. He thinks extremely ambitiously, which is important for kind of creating these things. He brings together really good teams and kind of has them, kind of collaborate well together and have great ambition together. And yet he doesn't have one of the things that frequently happens in the artificial intelligence space, which is he doesn't have what I call a messiah complex, which is the only safe, good AI is the one that I myself can build. I think that he brings in, like, for example, he asked, part of this, like the world tour and coming into Japan, is he's asking people to say, hey, look, here's what we're doing. Here's how we think it could be really good for humanity. Also share your perspective. What are your questions? What are your kind of key ideas in order to make this work? And that discourse means that he's very collaborative in how he builds this future of artificial intelligence. So I, obviously cannot speak more positively about Sam. He is awesome, and we're fortunate that he is one of the major leaders in AI, helping create this humanist future.
How about compared to Elon Musk?
So look, Elon is another one of the great entrepreneurs of our time. Revolutionizing majorly important industries, things like the rockets and cars and so forth. And he's done just so much amazing work, and all at the same time. And so, and by the way, also Elon cares very deeply about humanity. It's part of the reason why, along with Sam, he got OpenAI started and was, kind of instrumental to its takeoff. Now, I think Elon tends a little bit more towards the, AI can only be safe if he builds it versus other people. It's not as, I think anyone taking that approach, it's actually less safe than the approach that Sam is taking, which is let me get a number of different people involved. But, I'm, always incredibly impressed with the heroic achievements that Elon does, and also with his dedication to helping humanity.
So to me, they seem to be different types of entrepreneurs. Elon wants to make his own AI, but Sam, he wants to get a lot of people involved. Do you think that competition is important? Because, in order to keep AI and ChatGPT safe, there shouldn't be a monopoly. Do you agree, or do you think OpenAI should go ahead and creating their own stuff? Yeah.
Well, OpenAI was started in part to make sure that there wasn't a commercial monopoly. So OpenAI is a nonprofit. It's a 501c3. It's governed by a mission statement. It has a number of people on its board who have no economics, including Sam, in order to drive this in an effective way. It has a subsidiary for-profit that Microsoft is invested in. But if you even just look at the world today, you say, well, we have a number of different impressive companies. There's OpenAI, there's Microsoft, there's Google, there's a set of startups like my own Inflection, there's Anthropic, there's what Elon's doing. Obviously, other companies like Meta and others are also making substantial efforts here. So I don't think we're in a worry that where there's only one company anymore. And part of it to make sure that there was a kind of with a human individuals and human societies as a root customer for technologies that can empower entire industries. That's part of why OpenAI was started, and as part of the beneficial AI that OpenAI is going for.
So OpenAI is still a small company, and why were they able to make such a quick move? And also Microsoft, they cut a huge deal, and it seems that even Google is left behind with the AI race? What was their trick? Yeah.
Well, never count out Google. Very smart people have a whole bunch of data. But part of it is this is part of what's amazing when you're really focused with a very talented team, which is OpenAI said, look, there's this kind of famous paper, all you need is attention. And it's kind of like, well, all you need is attention and scale of these models. And they focused entirely on that. And they were very good about abandoning approaches that didn't work. They were good about focusing on, kind of what things were working and then to double down on them and to operate as a small number of hundreds, kind of team. And as such, they just built very impressive things. And so they went from behind where Google was on these things to ahead of where Google was on these things by that kind of focus. Now, that being said, Google is, kind of said, oh, right, there's a really important area here and has launched, started iterating on a product, and that product is, it's good quality.
So, Reed, I looked at your LinkedIn profile, and I didn't know that you work for Fujitsu, a very famous Japanese company, after you joined Apple. So, my question is, why wasn't a Japanese company able to create GPT-4 or GPT-3?
Well, part of this particular model is it's not about, yes, there's very much, there's intelligence in the algorithms, but it's about scale computing. So the people who can participate in this future in terms of making it have to have very large scale computers.
Right.
And so there's a small number of companies that currently provision that. And obviously there's some startups like, Inflection, my own, made an announcement that we have a large cluster of H100s. But then there is also, obviously, Amazon and Facebook and a number of others that have a substantial compute capability. Unfortunately, that's not an area that Japan has yet turned into. And I say unfortunately because I think Japan, in many ways, imagines really great technological futures, with kind of robots that help human life. And one of the things I love about the tradition of Japanese anime is kind of like this both kind of attention to trying to keep humanity, but also extend through technology and evolve through technology, and what the dialectic between that is, and all of these kind of great inventions and so forth. But scale compute is a thing that I think is only may now, because of the AI revolution, becoming more to Japan, but it was not something that was center of the action in Japan.
So I totally agree with your book that AI should contribute to humanity, and I have a positive view. So what can Japan contribute to AI? What can we do?
Well, I think one of the great things that I having some discussion with Joey Ito and others on this, who's now kind of doing various work on this in the university there and all the rest, is to say that the Japanese kind of concept of kami and of having kind of a pantheistic world is actually, in fact, a very good design for thinking about these agents and how they play in human life, and also the Japanese sense of being, kind of forward-looking and positive on how technology can integrate into human life. And so I think there's a whole bunch of things that Japan can do, Japanese invention can do, Japanese culture can do, and it's part of the reason why Joey, has roped me into helping and so forth, because it's kind of like, no, there's a bunch of things that can be very good here, and I'm looking forward to. I was in Japan earlier this year, kind of talking to people about this. Went to a conference in Kyoto. And I'm looking forward to coming back next year, because I'm anticipating that a bunch of interesting thinking and interesting design and interesting proposals will be coming out of kind of Japanese invention and entrepreneurship and creation.
Interesting. So just to clarify, did you mention kami, or did you say kami?
Kami, yes, as in the deities and the kind of Shintoism.
I see. So it's interesting.
I hope I got it right.
Yeah, you got it right.
So
it's okay. Different from the English word God. Do you think what's your image of kami? What can you elaborate on that?
Well, it's kind of it's well, and maybe in it's like having avatar is not quite the right word, because an avatar is supposed to be the instantiation of God, but it's like having different entities that have different kinds of superpowers that play a role in an ecosystem or a sociology of human and community and cultural existence. And like, for example, you might, leave offerings for a kami in order to have a plentiful harvest, or kind of deal with health and wellness and other kinds of things, and that the way that they can kind of play in a more kind of a society of creativity, a society of creation, is, I think, a very good thing. Now, I think we need to not overly anthropomorphize these, at least not yet, because I think right now they're primarily, kind of very interesting computational artifacts, and that may be all they are for a very long time. By the way, but even being that, that's magical, and that's another thing that I also like about the Kami parallel, because the emphasis on magic as the thing that we are discovering, and the superpowers that we're giving, our ability to create interesting things, do interesting work, live great lives. That kind of magical superpowers is one of the things that I think this amplification intelligence is giving us.
I think it's similar to Japanese people engage with nature. So instead of thinking AI as like a terminator, we tend to engage with them, or engage with the nature. So it's
exactly. That was the reason I love the Kami parallel, right? Because as opposed to the robots are coming for you, which is most of it's like 80% of what you see out of Hollywood and video content, maybe even north of that. It's to say, no, they can play lots of different roles. There's the kami of the stream. There's the kami of the tree. There's the kami and there's these different ways that you create a richer environment, a richer ecology that human beings and humanity can thrive in by having, and this is the nature part, the balance of nature. It's one of that nature versus technology and humanity and the evolution is one of the things I find so interesting about some of the anime that's doing this. Kind of visual and story exploration of where humanity can go with technology.
It's interesting because when I interview writers in Japan, they tend to claim that it was not them writing a book, but it was some kind of a superpower that helped them write. So it's very similar to your book that ChatGPT co-authored with you.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I definitely had a superpower co-authoring, and I think that the superpower, like for example, I've even done things like, gone home and asked, Pi, the inflection agent, I got these 3 things in my refrigerator. What could I make for dinner? Right. I mean, the superpowers go from this very mundane to this, write an epic poem about how an artificial intelligence helps human beings become more spiritual. Right. And, that would have taken me, if I could have even done a halfway credible job, would have taken me days. And in 15 minutes, I was refining something that was, pretty good.
Okay. So I believe that the Japanese people can use AI and ChatGPT in a creative way, but it's easy to imagine that maybe some country may use ChatGPT as a propaganda in a very negative way. Is there any ways we can regulate or keep AI in the hands of good people?
All technologies have this challenge that they amplify people, and they can amplify good people, they can amplify bad people, and we will definitely have some misinformation things. I think we'll have, Russian interference, a bunch of other things as kind of ways of doing this. I do think that AI can be part of the solution, both helping parse it and understand it. Like, say you had a personal intelligence that was in the browser saying, "Hey, you should be careful about this." Right? That doesn't necessarily strike me as correct or credible, because, by the way, humans can be deceptive too. I do think that some of the things that OpenAI and Inflection and Microsoft and others have been kicking around is, should you watermark content? So this thing we're doing here is, oh no, this is really read, and then something else that was generated is like, no, this is an artificial intelligence, whether it's a written piece of content, an audio piece of content, fairly soon now a video piece of content, to try to have that be more honest and transparent and understandable. And then, of course, we're going to have to try to help in this flood of information, help people sort out which things they can trust and believe in and which things they should approach with a skeptical mind. And, you know, that's, by the way, but that's the nature of life. That's why we have good journalism. That's the reason why science writes in, you know, kind of, you know, edited papers where committees of scientists review them. You know, this is new tools to this challenge, but it is a challenge we navigate already.
Interesting. And also in your book, you mentioned about AI creating like fake images, you know, hallucinations. So I think it's important to regulate that fake images, but at the same time, it puzzles me because maybe having a copyright is a very 20th century idea, and maybe everyone will start co-authoring with AI. So do you think the idea of individual writer or creating creative stuff will change in the future, especially in the age of AI?
Well, I think all creativity is going to start changing already this year pretty intensely, and then over the years, small number of N years. And I do think that, for example, pretty soon, you won't be writing like for example, today, you have very, very, very few people who write in longhand cursive, right? You know, they type. And similarly, I think that similar parallels, you won't write without using these kind of, personal AIs, these personal, amplification intelligences. You will be reading along with them, reading with you and highlighting things and so forth. And I think that will be part of how it all works. And so I think that's part of what the future will bring to us. But I don't think that will make us write less. I don't think that will make us read less. I think that will be a kind of an amplification of how we operate. And I think that's the that's the future that we will essentially be steering to. But I think the creativity and the creative process is already changing today.
Yes, because by reading your book, it seems that it's of course you writing a book, but it's like the whole human being using collective intelligence to write a book, because ChatGPT is eating human intelligence. So it's like me writing a book together with you. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. but it's elevating.
Right.
It's amplifying. Right, and that's the thing of that's the thing to look. Obviously, it's changing the game. So, like when you used to write on a typewriter, and someone comes along and says, "Here's a computer and a word processor," it's like, "Oh no, I got to learn this new thing." But by the way, once you learn that new thing, you have new superpowers. Your ability to write and rewrite, and like for example, like when I write an essay, I frequently will be typing so fast that I'll be doing half sentences that I'm going through as I'm trying to get the ideas out. And then I have to go back. Well, I couldn't do that on a typewriter. I can do that on a computer. And now I have, like, for example, the ways that I, in doing impromptu and other kinds of writing, I go, well, I want to argue this. And then I ask, Pi or ChatGPT, what's the counter argument? Like, how would you argue against this so I understand it? Or, hey, I'd like to understand, like, for example, the parallels, if I had thought about this before I had written impromptu, the parallels between Japanese kami and Shintoism and artificial intelligence. How should I understand that? Well, that's a prompt you can put in. Matter of fact, I probably will do that later tonight because I'm curious what it is, because it's an instant research assistant that helps you, and it's there for everybody. And that's the thing that's amazing. Just like, for example, today, if you're a wealthy person or a working class person, you have the same smartphone, right? If you have a smartphone, the smartphone gives the same superpowers across all of it. That's what's amazing about the amplification that we can get with, artificial intelligence.
Okay, so we need to wrap up. So I would like to have a final comment from you. What will happen in the next 10 years?
Well, that kind of prediction of the future is frequently a way to look like foolish in retrospect. But I do think that basically within a few years, every single professional activity, which includes you process information and you do something with it, could be writing a prescription as a doctor, creating a painting, making decisions about, investment or everything else, will have a personal artificial intelligence assistant. And as such, we will, within a number of years, there will be personal assistants like everywhere. Each of us will have one on our own. That's part of Inflection and Pi doing that. There will be ones that help in work and in projects and creativity. There'll be ones that help you with, I've come to visit Tokyo or Kyoto, and I'm trying to figure out how to get somewhere or what to see or where to eat. And I think you're going to have an entire rich world of that, and that will be sooner than 10 years.
Okay, thank you, Reid Hoffman, the author of Impromptu. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.